Andrew, I'm going to hand it over to you. Do you think that misinformation online has perhaps led to some of the violence that we're seeing? I personally think this is somewhat of a slippery slope here to blame the violence on media misinformation, but it's something that is being discussed very seriously in the mainstream media in the UK. So why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts?
Well, in this particular instance, Taylor, I think absolutely misinformation has led to the violence. And I always say that we're living in a diseased information age, drowning in misinformation and disinformation. And there's never been a more important time to question everything. And we covered this tragedy on the Muckrakers earlier this week, and we were extremely careful not to speculate and to bring in all sorts of prejudices, which others in the media have done. And what I always urge people to do is let's look at the facts and separate those facts from opinion. So what are the facts? The facts, as we know, that a 17-year-old, as you say, has been charged with the murder of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport. For legal reasons, the 17-year-old can't be named, and they've urged that we be very, very careful so that the prejudice, the trial itself is not prejudiced. The victims, as you rightly say, our hearts go out to them, and it's appalling. BB King was only 6 years old. Elsie Dot Stankham was 7 years old, and Alice Da Silva Aguirre was 9 years old. The attack occurred at the Hart Space Centre, and a teenager has been charged with 10 counts in addition to the murder, counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article. Horrendously, 8 other children and 2 adults were injured, and some are still in critical condition. So, as you rightly say, our hearts go out to all the families. And even there's a plea on some of the papers out here. They talk about sort of outrage and things like that. The families there, what happens on the streets when it all spilled out and the baying mobs have started raiding places and things like that, the families are just saying this is just adding to the grief and distress that we're suffering. And what happened, we had Ursula Doyle, that was announced Mersey Police during a midnight press conference, and she said we've got to have a fair trial and cautioned against prejudicing proceedings. And there was also Chief Constable Serena Kennedy. She said that it's an ongoing investigation involving the Lancashire Police and counter-terrorism units. The incident obviously deeply shocked the Southport community, and what happened is there were lots of attacks and protests and unrest. We had 100 arrests in central London yesterday, as well as horrendous violence in Southport. What happened is there was an attack on the mosque. I saw shops, some of the footage that was released. I saw shops being attacked. 50 officers were injured as a result. And apparently what's happened is the unrest was reportedly fueled by this social media misinformation suggesting an Islamic link to the stabbing. There's been no such thing established. And I think our rush to get there first on the news is so dangerous. And if ever there are a warning, and I make this point so often, if ever there's a warning for people in the media to take your job responsibly, what you are doing affects lives, and it's actually people's lives are being cost as a result of it. That's my view.
Interesting insights. I think that there is something to be said that when there is a lack of information with regard to certain very highly emotional events such as this one, or emotional tragedies such as this one, people are often left to speculate, and violence can erupt and can outbreak. Basil, I want you to also weigh in here with your thoughts. Any reaction to what Andrew said? What do you think is perhaps causing the violent outbursts that we are seeing in the UK?
Well, to use the popular term, we've got to get granular with exactly what's happened over the last few days. And it was a news website called Channel 3 Now that first reported online on the X platform that the identity of the attacker was somebody called Ali al-Shakati, who had arrived in the UK on a small boat and was on the MI6 watch list, hence people taking to the streets in Southport and attacking a mosque. Now, Channel 3 Now poses as an American website, and the claims were reposted and seen by nearly 2 million viewers before being deleted. This misinformation was quickly picked up by what the Daily Mirror are calling far-right thug Tommy Robinson. I wouldn't disagree with them there. And indeed Andrew Tate, who told his 10 million followers that an illegal migrant had stabbed 6 little girls and told people to wake up. So that appears to be the kernel of where this all came from. The news website, Channel 3 News, I've been looking at it this morning. It is supposedly linked to Russia. They have a banner headline on their website now with a sincere apology and correction regarding the Southport stabbing incident. They admit they got it wrong. I can't attest as to the links to Russia, how accurate they are or not. The stories that they're leading with are the victims themselves are being identified, a missing person, the arrest of the 17-year-old, and the fact that I say fact, I'm quoting this particular website here. We don't know whether this is further misdirection, but they're now saying that the 17-year-old suspect was born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents and moved to the Southport area in 2013. A former neighbour expressed profound shock and disbelief upon hearing the news and said that during their time in Cardiff, they were a seemingly ordinary household, with the mother primarily focused on homemaking and the father consistently employed. So not much to go on there as to a motive. We don't even know if that's true. Once again, that's Channel 3 now having issued their apology. But that's where all this started, was that fake report. Whether it was a mistake or whether it was deliberately designed to inflame tensions, that's another matter, and it's very difficult to say. But what we can say is that, the establishment talking heads and powerful talking heads of that, former boss of MI5, Sir Richard Dearlove, and the former security minister, Stephen McPartland, have both suggested that Russia could be behind the social misinformation campaign, which led to the scenes in Southport. Richard Dearlove was talking to LBC's Nick Ferrari this morning, and he fears that Kremlin bots could be doing not only this, but perhaps other things. I mean, they're already being accused of, once again, they're replaying the 2016 election Russian meddling scenario with respect to Kamala Harris. It's quite bizarre.
Right. Let me just jump in here, then hand it over to Andrew. I will say, I think many people are going to see these reports coming out of the Daily Mail. It was a special investigation, which appears to link a certain account or website to the Russian Federation, claiming that Russia is somehow behind stirring up violence in the UK. I have to be honest, many people are going to hear that and find it quite cartoonish, given the fact that, as you had mentioned, Basil, there has been, of course, accusations that Russia was involved in election interference in the United States in 2016. The United States and the Western world has a tendency to blame other countries for its domestic turmoil. We also just recently saw that Iran was blamed for potentially being involved with the assassination attempt against the former president, Donald Trump. So people are skeptical when they hear reports that seem to point blame at the Western enemies, being Iran, China, Russia. Andrew, any thoughts on the validity to this report and it being a substantial report? Do you think that people have a right to be skeptical here? Or do you think that this report shows a clear connection with Russia?
I think it's very clear, as you say. It's always we rush to demonize the usual people, don't we, in the usual states. I did do a deep dive myself, however, into Channel 3 now. There's still the website is up there, and also the Twitter account, which is referenced. When you look at it, however, they've only got 3,276 followers, and they're following 21. And it's very interesting to see who they're actually following. They're doing a deep dive. They're following the Minneapolis police, the city of Philadelphia, the Fairfax County, and Baltimore police. Not that many people. It's tiny. But they do, as Basil mentioned, they do say our response to on a misleading information published in our recent article on our website, Channel 3 Now, we deeply regret any confusion or inconvenience this may have cause. It's up there. They have a tiny following. I can see no evidence, and I'll be always open, say keep your open mind, of any Russian influence at all. They say they're based in the US. But my concern is this, is that lots of people are jumping on tragedy in order to promote their own causes. The rioters and looters and the appalling scenes that we saw up in Southport and also in London have nothing to do with the grief that the families are suffering. And actually, those families have begged them not to let this spill out into something else. And this is what we need to address.
But just to jump in quickly, those numbers for Channel 3 now, very small reach, and yet 2 million people saw their misinformation. Tommy Robinson picked it up, so did Andrew Tate. That would seem to indicate that there may be other actors at work amplifying Channel 3 now, certainly in this case, because it's very difficult to get that kind of reach and get influencers to retweet and amplify a story without a third party being involved in some way. For such a negatively small organization as Channel 3 now, about whom I can't find a Wikipedia article. And usually we get something on all these people and who they are and where they're based. And also, it's very easy to say Russian linked. You can just say that without actually demonstrating what those links are. They got Russian shareholders. Do we know who the shareholders are? What's the identity of the commissioning editor, so on and so forth. None of that is yet in the public domain, as far as I can tell.
And what we should do, I'm just picking up on a couple of points there, Basil. We should actually get somebody from Channel 3 on and let's actually quiz them about that. But I would urge also against getting your information from, and we'll get Jeremy onto that. He's going to make the phone calls by the end of the show and say they're booked for the next one. What I would say is don't get your information from Wikipedia. Wikipedia can basically be edited by anybody, and whilst it's the wisdom of the crowd, there is so much misleading information there. What it does remind us that we have to get our information from as many different sources as possible. We have to question that information, and as I say, as we always like to do here on the Muckrakers, not just ask the questions but question those answers.